Hello, I'm Plutoburns, and welcome to Eagle Land. You know, one of the wonders of independent housing is suddenly you have to feed yourself all the time. And going to McDonald's is not an option, at least not if you want to maintain a certain waistline. Thankfully, Food Wars is an excellent manga that teaches me how to cook. At least if I was involved in high-stakes cooking competitions with unlimited resources.
Food Wars is shockingly not the first manga to try combining the battle shonen aesthetic with cooking. Not sure what it is about cooking that just screams competition, but Iron Chef is a hit, so what the hell do I know? But this one has a gimmick. It was drawn by a former porn artist.
Which I checked out in the name of research.
Honey, are you looking at porn?
Yeah, it was drawn by the guy who did the next manga I'm reviewing. It's for research.
Can I research with you?
Yeah, sure.
Get no dessert till you clean off your plate, so eat it.
It was alright.
Food Wars opens with Bandana Bro making food in his family restaurant. He is also very fond of experimenting with questionable flavor combinations and testing them out on his childhood friend. Today's recipe involves octopus, which causes her to hallucinate being molested by tentacles. Because it's tasty?
This becomes a running gag of the series where really delicious food will cause people's clothes to fly off. It's blatantly for the fan service, but I just can't help but love how over the top it is. It's also the first time I've been allowed to show tentacle porn on this show.
But it won't be the last.
The plot of Chapter 1 is that some shady loan shark types show up while his dad is out and start trying to harass them into closing for reasons that aren't important. The harassment culminates with them trashing the ingredients, then showing up and demanding meat-based food. But Vasquez casts his cooking magic and manages to whip up a meat dish that is so violently delicious it makes Head Lady's clothes dissolve. It also dissolves her lackey's clothes, establishing a refreshing trend of man service in this manga, as well as the usual boobs fan service. Vasquez stands triumphant in his defense of his family restaurant. He greets his father, who promptly informs him that the restaurant is going to be closed for a while and Vasquez is being shipped off to cooking boarding school.
Aww, but I was so invested in the fate of that small, unimportant restaurant. Why would you think I'd care how he stacks up against the best cooks in the world in a competitive scholastic environment where they face off against various gimmick-driven, colorful personalities? What psycho's gonna be into that?
He initially fails the entrance exam because the principal's daughter giving the test was literally born with a golden spoon in her mouth and didn't take kindly to his disrespectful attitude. But then her grandpa wanders in and tries the dish and is all like, "Yum, pass!" Then, at the opening ceremony, Grandpa Roshi flat out tells the student body that most of them will fail and their academic corpses will be used to fuel the greatness of the few who survive. Then Vasquez walks up to a mic and is all like, "Sounds like fun, see you in class, stepping stones."
Making friends and influencing people. Well played.
But when Vasquez heads to the student dorm, he is presented with a cooking challenge before he is allowed to live in the school-provided housing, because cooking is serious business.
Wontons. And those poor fuckers out there are eating this.
Wild salmon!
He wins and meets his gimmicky neighbors, housemates. Of note is this kid who seems way more interested in the wood he uses to smoke food than the actual food, and Strips McGee here, who can't keep his damn clothes on.
It's actually nice to see a fan service manga provide as much man candy as it does boobs and butts. Try and, broaden the audience while still being a shonen battle manga.
Speaking of, it's time we got into the pre-arc storyline. The pre-arc is where a shonen battle manga shows off its style and setup without having to have very high stakes. Other examples include training with Kakashi and rescuing Zoro. Food Wars' gimmick is the Shogeki, a cook-off where the students gamble whatever they happen to possess. In this one, Vasquez defends Space Dandy's Dawn Research Club from being taken over by, holy shit, a black girl?
At least, I think she's black. She could just be really tan. But then why would she always be wearing an American flag bikini? It's hard to tell, because there aren't a lot of black people in manga for me to compare her design to.
Why would they want to draw black people? Black people are such stuck-up snobs, so damn proud of their fancy cheeses and wine. Oh, and they're also massive cowards.
This did not come up in your job interview.
And the first actual arcs are the cooking training camp, followed by some kind of cooking competition / student election thing. Now on the training camp arc, we really get to know the wilting flower who's been latched onto Vasquez since the first handful of chapters. She was in danger of flunking out of the school, but Lily was lucky enough to get paired with the protagonist and she rode his coattails for a while. But in the camping trip, she is forcibly removed from the shelter of Vasquez's skill and proves that she can handle herself admirably. She just has confidence issues. She grows from the experience and becomes a major secondary player without ever falling in love with Vasquez.
This bears repeating. In a manga targeted to teenage boys, the majority of the character heavy lifting is done by a secondary female character who isn't in love with the protagonist. This is unprecedented.
I'm not gonna act like this is a huge step forward for women, cause it ain't, but it is nice to see three-dimensional secondary female characters who aren't licking the protagonist's boots. It's also worth noting that in the cooking tournament, the eventual final is a three-way between Vasquez, Indian Spice Man, and Marcus Phoenix. So women are awesome and all, but this is still a man's manga about boys becoming men with real battles and real death.
I just don't have many complaints when it comes to this manga. The art is wonderful, the characters are genuinely funny, and they have very neat gimmicks. And the food drawings are just lovingly detailed. Which does lead me into my one major complaint about this manga. Food on the page is not the same as food in real life.
Look at this food. Look at it. It practically oozes off the page. But that's it. The first bite may be with the eye, but eventually you do want to actually eat it. I've never quite understood the desire to base your manga on something that you can't convey through your eyes. Sure, I'll just take your word for it that this cantata is emotionally moving and amazing. Sure, that looks amazingly delicious, but until someone invents scratch and lick panels, it just ain't the same.
You want some? You want some? Isn't it delicious?
This is just something that cannot be overcome. But by God, if the manga doesn't try its damnedest to convey how delicious the food is with just words. The food preparation and taste discussion word bubbles can get frickin' gigantic. There's even this big-titted judge who everyone thinks is gonna take her clothes off, but instead she strips off her dialogue and goes full English major on the food. It's actually a bit overblown. I found myself tuning out the dialogue boxes when I saw that they were just gonna be upchucking descriptions in my face. It's not the most fun read.
It's also not even remotely believable that people take their cooking so damn seriously.
Show a little bit of passion to why the fuck you're a chef. Do you understand? I'll pay for your flight to fuck off back to Australia.
Today's secret ingredient is...
Scallop!
Yeah, all those people, they're nuts.
And there isn't quite enough of an abstraction of the cooking for me to treat it like Dragon Ball Z for cooking, like you can with Prince of Tennis. It stays mostly grounded. Yeah, sure, there's a guy who studies your moves and will make a better version of your dish. A villain archetype nearly as common as the skinny, shifty knife guy. And the pomp and circumstance around these contests rivals the insanity of the events in Gamblefish.
But even though this one isn't done yet and certainly has its idiosyncrasies, I still recommend checking it out. It's got a great sense of humor and really fun characters.
Vasquez isn't infallible and treats all his losses like a learning experience, putting him well ahead of many heroes of Shonen. Wilting Flower never really grows out of being overly deferential and caregiving, but she definitely becomes more confident in her cooking, which is fun to see. And the tsundere mistress from the beginning test is shown to be forced into her Ice Queen attitude by the position of her family. She has a much softer side that she only indulges when she feels safe from prying eyes.
Last thing I want to touch on in regards to the plot is the end of the last arc.
Spoiler warning, spoiler warning.
Everybody's coming to get me.
After a really cop-outy three-way final, Vasquez actually loses. Not because his dish wasn't amazing, the judges themselves admitted that the three dishes were almost impossibly excellent and difficult to compare. So the judges went with Spice Rack, because they could feel the true heart of his cooking inside his spices.
You heard me. The main character lost because he didn't have a gimmick.
Well, there's more to it than just lack of a gimmick. Spice Rack uses spices because that's what he learned from his mentor and the woman he loves. It's a part of who he is. Vasquez has spent his whole life experimenting and jumping from idea to idea. His father encouraged this. As such, he has a lot of experience, but it's oddly undisciplined. There's no central heart to his cooking. He makes things just to make them as delicious as possible. Even wilting flour has a core to her character, a sense of needing to care for people with her food.
It was a really well contextualized character moment, and I thought it deserved to be highlighted. Let us close with an art discussion.
As previously stated, the art for the food is scrumptious. The panels have a good flow to them and a real sense of action and motion, even though the characters aren't moving all that much. There's an excellent variety of character designs with a lot of improvement over the female designs from the artist's other work. They all have basically the same facial structure, but the move away from porn has given the artist more leeway to have comedic faces, which help with distinguishing the characters. Which is good, because even in pornos, having all the girls in a harem have the same face is a problem.
The author of Food Wars is Sakuda Yuto, whose only other work is a soccer manga. The artist is Seiki Shun, who, as previously mentioned, has mostly worked in porn. The manga is still going, and there's an anime in the works. It's a nice change of pace for the shonen genre, being fun and exciting without yet having devolved into self-serious pretension. It may not be your thing, but it's worth checking out to see if food on the page works for you. Till next time, I'm Plutoburns, and this has been Eagle Land.
Get yourself an egg and beat it. Have some more chicken.